Good evening, everyone. I'm going to call the City Council Urban Affairs and Housing Committee meeting to order. We have 2 items on our agenda this morning. Our first item is order number 23-100-8941, a communication from Attorney Gemma Cashman on behalf of Trammell Crow Company regarding a proposed amendment to the City Code, Chapter 650 zoning, by adding a new section to create the Sassaville Way Residential Zoning Overlay District. This is being continued from our November 6th meeting. We do not have a screen tonight, but I know you have a packet, and we all have multiple pieces of material. So I don't know if you have anything you want to say before we start, or just let me go.
You want to click the mic so the button, it lights up.
Oh,
there you go.
Thank you. Thanks for tolerating my crutches and all that this evening. And I'm sorry I missed the last couple of meetings, including the first one. And I just wanted to point out that since the first meeting, there's been a real lot of work that's gone into this. There's been a lot of discussions with the neighbors, other abutters that aren't directly close to the property, many of the departments of the city, many of the city councilors, and we've been before planning board and have talked and met with members of the site plan review committee on certain occasions. We think we've made a lot of headway since the first meeting because we heard what people were saying. We understand that this is a sensitive area in Marlborough and one that was being looked at with others as being sensitive. It is, however, a limited industrial site in Marlborough that can be utilized for that type of project. When Trammell Crow approached our client and discussed with them the uses there, they all felt that they could do a better job with the site and preserve more of the site and make it a much more eco-friendly type of facility if it was residential with a little bit of retail mixed into it, a small restaurant or something like that. And, you know, Boston Scientific, they'd like to see something to do with the property. Right now, they're not going to build something for their own facility there yet, so they want to see this type of project go in. I think it was aptly pointed out the other night at the planning board that, you know, this is a limited industrial site. It's not a conservation site we're going to convert to residential. We're going from more intrusive use to a less intrusive use. I'll let the rest of the team talk about all the changes we've made on the project since then to meet the many questions and concerns that were raised by people. And we're hopeful that, you know, after tonight we can maybe be a little bit closer. And although I did see we got 2 notices today, one from planning, which I just had a chance to look at a few minutes ago, and one from site plan review. And I'm not sure if anyone from site plan review is here tonight, but when I did talk to them earlier in the day, we felt that we could work through verbiage changes and things like that over the next couple of weeks. So with that said, I'll turn it over to Michael, since you've been running the show since I've been gone with Gemma. So you're up.
Thank you, Bill. Good evening, councilors. Thank you again for having us before you tonight. Michael Flannery from Goulson & Stores, working with Bill and Gemma on behalf of Trammell Crow Company. I would like to spend just a few minutes running through some of the highlights that are included in the packet you've passed out. Recognize we don't have it on the screen, but wanted to hit a few of the high points. And then Mark Schreiberg, who's the Vice President for Design and Development, is going to touch on some of the design updates that are also shown in the packet. But if you could look at page 3 of the packet, when we were before you last week, we showed a version of this zoning amendment chart, and this summarizes changes to the draft zoning amendment from initial submission to now. It's a little different this week than it was last week. After we met with you last week, we finalized this. We included it in a memo to the planning board that I hope you all received copies of, which is a much more in-depth summary of the changes we've made. But the major highlight here, and we discussed this last week, was, you know, what is the right threshold for requiring a special permit for development on this site? And, you know, we discussed that a little bit last week. We thought about it. And we proposed that the threshold should be, you need a special permit, period, to develop on this site. And in coming to that conclusion, we felt like, given all the concerns about the sensitivity of the site, and we understand them, where they're coming from, given the detailed questions about how will things such as the stormwater management system be designed, the way to ensure that everybody can get comfortable and get on the same page about what that ultimate design looks like is to go through the special permit process with peer review and all the bells and whistles that attach to that. So that is where we've come out on that. That's what we're proposing. And we think it is really the best way to try and provide answers for, like I said, the detailed questions that have come up, which are really difficult to answer at this stage of development. But I hope it shows the developer's commitment to answer them to the satisfaction of the city before any construction would ever begin on the site. If you look at the next sheet in your packet, we have heard some questions and concerns about the density of the site. So we wanted to provide a little bit of context. This is a chart that compares the proposed density of this project to the density of other residential projects of similar scale that have been approved in the last few years in the city. As you can see, we think we compare favorably and are on the low end of some of these comparable development projects, given the size of our site. And this is would be consistent with a 286 unit development as is being proposed. We also think the density of our site on a floor area basis compares favorably to a lot of the residential zoning that is close to and abuts our site. If you look at the zoning code for the residential A2 district, there's a lot coverage maximum of 30%, and there's a building height maximum of 2.5 stories. So you can sort of roughly extrapolate from that you could build about 60% of your lot area within your building. Maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, depending on walkways and driveways and things of that nature. But call it somewhere between 50 or 60%. We think is fair. If you look at our site, we have over 1 million square feet of land. We're proposing just about 400,000 square feet of floor area, and that comes to a floor area ratio of about 0.4. If you turn to the next slide, we're happy to get into more detail about this, but we have prepared and submitted, Patrick, thank you, a fiscal impact analysis that analyzes the expected tax revenues versus the anticipated or expected additional costs from this project that would the city would need to incur, and we think it's a favorable analysis showing a net benefit to the project. As part of this study, we look carefully at the number of school-age children expected to reside at the project, and we're happy to talk about the methodology here, but the estimate is 15 school-age students, which we think is a fair comparison if you look at the population that's coming out of comparable projects in the city. I'm going to turn it over briefly to Mark, who's going to talk about some of the design changes that are consistent with the zoning updates we're proposing.
Great. Thank you, Mike. Mark Schaberg with Trammell Crow Company. I want to touch on something that I've heard from a number of people now, and that's why does the design keep changing? And the direct answer to that is that we are listening, and we're listening to concerns from the community, from the Conservation Committee, from the Planning Board. So if you look at the draft site plan in the packet, you'll see that we do, as Mike said, have low density on this 23.3 acre site. We have pulled all of the buildings and all of the structures, all of the site impact out of the 200-foot riverfront setback, as well as the 100-foot wetland setback, which in effect, once this project is built out, will preserve that land untouched. We're not deforesting anything in that area. There's no impact to that 200-foot setback for the riverfront and the 100-foot setback for the wetland. In addition to that, we've moved the closest building away from the Blazewood neighborhood, and that provides a larger setback. We also have later in this packet, which you'll see, rendering of what the emergency access will look like at the end of Blazewood, the top of Blazewood, where the cul-de-sac is currently. And I think you'll see from that rendered image, there is no visible building, and in fact, there will be preserved forest between the buildings and that Blazewood corridor. You'll also see in this site plan a healthy, generous setback from the Assabet River Trail, and the lower right-hand portion of this site in plan. And you can see where that Assabet River Trail comes to and crosses our entrance. That will be a signaled crossing. Anybody coming upon that crossing will be able to hit a crosswalk button, the lights will flash, it'll be a notified signal. In addition to that, we are suggesting, and if you turn to the next page, the civil site plan, that we will monitor the sedimentation and the temperature for our stormwater and our stormwater runoff. This includes monitoring of flows upstream from our site, as well as all of the terminations for our stormwater system. That monitoring will be done before, during, and after construction. Whatever the city agrees to in the operations and maintenance plan will live with the site, and any owner of the site will be required to follow that monitoring plan. We have discussed the exact stormwater design in the past. There is some work that needs to be done to find out what kind of soils we have on the site, do a soil characterization. That soil characterization will inform our stormwater design, and the stormwater design will be appropriate for cold water resource, as well as the Fort Meadow Reservoir, and we are committed to using the latest data for stormwater and flooding. And all of that will be baked into a plan that will be reviewed, I assume, at special permit, and most likely during site plan application as well. If you turn to the next page, please. You'll see the draft landscape plan. The thing to note about this is that we're suggesting that we're replanting with local plantings that are native species to this area, over 6 acres of land here. So not only do we have a low area coverage, a low impact to the amount of area on this parcel, we're suggesting that surrounding all of our impervious surface or porous pavement, if we need porous pavement for the stormwater design, we're going to be putting in local native plantings that have no long-term irrigation needs. As soon as the plants go in, they'll be irrigated only enough to get them to grow in that area, and then all irrigation will be stopped. Turn to the next page, please. This is the rendering I spoke about previously. We're looking here from the top of Blazewood Avenue currently up the emergency access drive. You'll see the gate there in the mid-ground. That gate will be a automatic gate. It will be actuated by any emergency service strobe. So a visual operated beacon. That will be maintained by the operations staff at the site, and it will always be in working order. There's going to be power to this location, so nobody will need to reset this after it's used. And this Blazewood Avenue extension will be maintained wholly by the operations staff at the site. So any snow removal that needs to be done, any clipping of the local native grasses that you see in this plan will be done by our operations staff, and it'll be maintained to look nice year-round. And if you turn to the next page, please. I think most of you have seen this rendering in the past. This is a rendering showing the entrance to our site. You can see as you continue down the drive, straight in front of the main drive is the amenity building and residential buildings on either side, and in the lower left-hand side our retail establishment. And then you can also see the crossing for the Assabet River Trail here. One thing that this rendering doesn't show is any kind of lighted signal in that area, but our commitment is to place a lighted signal in that area. We'd also like to speak further with the Assabet River Trail organization to make sure that you know, we're using what they have used at other crossings. If you could turn to the next page, please. This is a kind of bird's eye view here, looking at the amenity building, our pool, and some of the residential buildings, and then you can see off in the back of the rendering, top of the rendering, the retail building. This one, I think a lot of you have seen in the past as well. But if we turn to the next slide, or page, please. We heard that there was some question about how do these buildings feel from the downhill side of this site. And you can see on the right-hand side of this rendering, there is a 4-story with a basement. This is the tallest facade that you'll see on the site. There are 2 buildings that have this 4-story plus basement configuration. And you can also see the grade and how it changes as you look back up the site. Right in the midground there is again our amenity building. And you can see some of the site walls that are necessary as we come down to this almost the lowest level on the site, lowest paved level on the site. If we could turn to the next page, please. We included this because we thought that it would paint a picture about what kind of community we're intending to create in this location. These buildings are larger, obviously, than single-family homes, but you can see by the way they're sited, by the exterior facade and how it changes along its length, that these buildings don't feel massive, and in fact, they feel like a nice place to be, a nice center for community, and along with the landscaping package, we think it provides a very beautiful, scenic place in Marlborough.
And we've gotten some questions along the way about the maximum building height in the zoning amendment. The amendment proposes a maximum height of 70 feet, measured to the midpoint of a gable roof. These will all have gabled roofs from the side of the building facing Sassville Way. But that height accommodates the 4-story buildings. If you look at the site plan, you'll see that the conception of this project is to provide some variation in height, which is an important design feature. But of the 7 multifamily buildings, the conception is only the 2 of them would need to be 4-story. So that maximum height is to accommodate really just those 2 buildings out of 7.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. That kind of wraps up some of the changes we've made. And again, changes made directly in response to some of the concerns and questions we've heard here. And our intention is to continue to work in that vein. We'd like to hear what difficulties people are having, and we'd like to be able to respond to them. So we hope that our design continues to do so, and thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, so I'm just going to move right into this just to go through a couple of things that I made a list of. So the city council had its public hearing on September 18th, 2023. Again, the same people that are here, I believe, spoke. We had 16 people who asked questions, 10 people who spoke in opposition, and we also had the 15 residents of Blazewood who had sent correspondence. Council members received the draft public hearing transcript as well as a copy of the letter from the Conservation Commission with their comments, concerns, and recommendation, and a letter from David Mark, the president of the Assabet River Rail Trail. The Planning Board held its public hearing on October 23rd and continued it until November 13th. 19 people had questions, and no one spoke in favor except the petitioners. 16 people spoke in opposition, and the minutes of this meeting were included in the November 13th Planning Board meeting. Thankfully, Caitlin was able to get us a copy of their recommendation for today's meeting. I know I sat trying to come up with something just as I found she had sent one of her own. Said thank you. Councilors received a copy of a letter from Timothy Nelson on behalf of Boston Scientific supporting approval of the zoning and the proposed housing development. And then for tonight, we've received their fiscal analysis and traffic management study, a memo from Dave Pitney analyzing why they believe this zoning amendment only requires 6 votes instead of the normal 8. The solicitor has been copied, and I thought he was supposed to be here tonight. He is here. Yay! We got a second memo from Dave Pitney in support of the proposed Sassaville Way Residential Overlay District, describing design changes and rezoning language modifications, including a change to a development proceeding, as I said, with a special permit. It includes answers to questions asked at the Planning Board on 10/23, and it has a color-coded document delineating their proposed changes to the zoning document. And today we received a communication from City Engineer DePercio with their comments from himself, Priscilla Ryder from Conservation, and Commissioner Tway from the Building Department. So I have questions. I hope everybody had a chance to read through everything that we got. I know some of it came late in the day, but I think probably the best thing to do is just start going through the actual draft language, unless the solicitor would like to say anything about the question of the proposed, who proposed the amendments or the zoning. I think that question got asked at the Planning Board by another developer, but it certainly does impact this.
Good evening, everyone. So on that question, sorry, thank you. On that question, Madam Chair, so we're going to continue to look at that. We did get that question from the Planning Board on another application, so we'll be reviewing that. If it does come out of committee or in committee, we'll provide guidance on that either way as to this application as well.
Okay, and I'm sure once we get this to
Madam Chair?
you. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I have a question. What is the question that you're pursuing?
Sorry, through the chair. So the question that came up with the Planning Board, and another was whether we had a proper petitioner to initiate the zoning amendment.
Thank you for the clarification for that.
If I could, Madam Chair?
Yes.
Yeah, as you know, Boston Scientific did send a letter in support. They are the petitioner. They were notified when the public hearing started and everything. It would not be problematic to get an affidavit or a statement from them to stick in the file, which I think if you look at the case that was cited by that attorney in the other matter, actually an affidavit or a statement by the landowners enough to put in the file.
All right, I'm sure that the solicitor will rule on that. So the other ruling that he will give us when this gets to him is the question of how many votes it will take. So we'll wait on that one. All right, so everybody should have the blue highlighted changes that are in there, and I tried to mark it up so I do not forget anything that was in Mr. DePercio's memo, other than some of the questions that I have. They begin with the Article 6 entitled Special Districts Overlays and Special Requirements, hereby amended to add a new section 65039A, or such other numbering as deemed appropriate, entitled Sassaville Way Residential Overlay District. The purpose and objectives. The purpose shall be to encourage and enhance land development and desired growth patterns for the advancement of the public health, safety, and welfare by providing for the development of mixed-use family housing developments on sites which are otherwise zoned for other purposes, but which, because of the size of the parcel being developed and its proximity to other residential neighborhoods, and new additional words, recreational, environmental, and/or residential amenities, will provide an appropriate environment for mixed-use multifamily housing development consistent with the stated economic development and environmental stewardship objectives of the city. So I guess my question to you is, what are the recreational and environmental amenities that this land has? Because those are two new words to this document.
So we inserted these words to recognize the environmental sensitivity of this site, and also, to recognize that for the residents, we do hope that the location, the proximity to the reservoir is going to be an amenity and a benefit for those folks.
But it's not, all right.
Plus an enhancement to the rail trail at that area, because there will be a bike stop, a place for them to repair vehicles, get water, and with a restaurant, hopefully something like La Choux or something, they'll be stopping on the weekend and being in there.
Okay. And because I have my head down, if anybody has questions and I'm not paying attention, please just let me know. Councilor Perlman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just curious as well in terms of 1A1 around the specific, it doesn't mention any of the housing goals of the city, and just economic development, environmental stewardship objectives. Is that something, I know that kind of aligns with the other recreational and environmental words that were stated, but I know in the planning board meeting that also came up as a question from folks about how this is aligning with the city's housing goals, which I know are not clearly defined, but would love to kind of hear the response to that.
Well, we certainly think that the production of new housing aligns with the city's goals as we understand them, and they may not be clearly defined, but I think we're all aware of the general restriction on supply of housing in this part of Massachusetts. If we feel like that's, if anyone feels like that's enough of a goal, purpose, or priority of the city that it should be added to the section, we'd certainly be open to that.
Yeah, I would argue that I don't know if, given that there isn't some stated goals around housing, that this would necessarily align. I know there's need for a variety of housing within the city, and certainly affordable housing, which I know the percentage was raised in the changes. So I was just curious where that was coming from. I don't know if it needs to be added at this time.
Do you have a recommendation for adding something?
Not particularly, because I just think that it would be in poor taste without having an outlined housing goals for it to report back to, at least updated.
All right, so we get to number 2, which for purposes of this zoning district, a mixed-use development shall include a mix of multifamily residential uses in any eligible use set forth in subsection D, which may be commingled into a single structure or multiple structures with other eligible uses of the same property. New language in blue, proponents are encouraged where practical to allow undeveloped land within the SWR overlay district and outside of proposed construction and disturbed area to remain in its natural state. Accordingly, mixed-use developments shall benefit the public health, safety, and welfare through the sharing of parking lots and driveway curb cuts to minimize the amount of impervious paved parking area and driveway curb cuts, reduce automobile trips and traffic congestion, improve walkability within the property, and thereby improve air quality. So Mr. DePercio's comments are, given the somewhat remote location and the unsuccessful attempt at mixed use at a similar site on Cimarano Drive, The council should consider whether mixed use is appropriate for this site or whether the city would be better served by a residential-only zoning overlay. So I will just leave that out there to think about, unless anybody has questions or wants to talk about it.
You want us to opine?
No, I think that one's just one of those,
Okay.
we'll talk more when I go through all of this, I think. Number 3, for purposes of this section, the SWR overlay district shall be superimposed on the other districts existing at the time that any land in said underlying district is also included in the SWR overlay district. The SWR overlay district is located adjacent to Sassaville Way, as indicated on the city's zoning map. B is the authority of the permit granting authority. And number 1 is the city council shall be the permit granting authority for special permit and site plan approval in the district in all instances. Number 1, a development which proceeds
Madam
under
Chair?
the district.
I'm
Sorry.
sorry for interrupting. I just want to catch something before you move on too far. In item 3, they talk about the SWR overlay district is located adjacent to Sassaville Way, as indicated in the zoning map. Shouldn't the lots be included, the lot IDs, as part of
I'm
that?
sorry, I guess I was looking at the comment that I thought it was for A3. It is A3, sorry, that's my fault, I missed
Yeah.
it.
Yeah,
the
no, it's just a
section-
correction. As we're going through it, I realize it's not included.
Yeah, no, the section indicates the district is located adjacent, but does not define the specific parcel.
Right.
So I don't know if we want to have indicated on Appendix A, which would then have the parcel, or
So
something.
we certainly want the parcel to be appropriately identified. I would point out that if you look at the very end of the amendment, if you look at section L2, it references the zoning map and establishes a zoning change over this particular parcel, which is referenced for its map and parcel number.
I thought it was in here somewhere.
That's on page 7.
L2, the zoning map.
It's the very last.
Yes,
Yeah,
okay.
page 7, right?
That's correct.
And I would guess if we don't change it and the solicitor feels like it needs to be clarified, he will make that change when it gets to him. So are we all comfortable with knowing that there is the specificity in the very last part of this?
Yeah.
Okay. Did that take care of your, thank you for pointing out? that I
Yeah.
missed that
No,
one?
I'm fine, and thank you for clarifying the point.
So where was I? Number 1, the city council shall be the permit granting authority. In all instances, the development which proceeds under the district is subject to a site plan approval in accordance with Section 270-2 of the Marlborough City Code. And 2, an application for a special permit for a use in the district shall comply with the requirement of 650-59 of the zoning ordinance, with the exception that the city council shall be the permit granting authority for special permit and site plan approval in the district, and the voting threshold shall be a simple majority in accordance with Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 40A, Section 9. So, Mr. DePercio's comment, we recommend that the city council be the special permit granting authority, but that the site plan review committee be the site plan approval granting authority for this and in any future similar special permit projects. And I totally agree. I kind of have always wondered why we ever agreed to have us be site plan approval. So I'm sure we can figure out how to change that language unless anybody really wants to stay site plan approval for the project. I don't hear anybody jumping up and down. Okay. Number 2 is the city council may elect to waive or modify any of the dimensional and parking requirements set forth in this section during site plan review, if it makes a finding that to do so will enhance the overall design of the district. Number C is exclusivity and control. This section of the zoning ordinance exclusively controls any mixed-use development in the district and supersedes any other provision of the zoning ordinance with respect to all matters described in this section. In the event of any conflict between the provisions of this section and any other provision of the zoning ordinance, the provisions of this section shall govern control. Mr. DePercio's comment is the reference to section 650-39A appears to be incorrect, and I did not have time to find out what is the correct one. But again, I guess I would leave that to the solicitor to confirm what's the correct reference, unless you had looked it up.
If I may, Madam Chair, so any reference in here to section 650-39A that's the proposed numbering for this article. So it's just a self-reference. If this ends up not being 39A, if the city wants to use some other kind of alphanumeric for it, that we would just change that reference.
Madam Chair?
Councillor Ossing.
The applicant is correct. We just ran out of numbers, so
Yeah.
we'll come up with some number.
Okay, and maybe that can just be clarified so that it doesn't read as strangely, like thinking that it's referencing another part versus specifically referencing this. But again, we'll let the solicitor deal with that language. Again, eligible uses, except as specifically set forth to the contrary below. All uses permitted in the residential A2 and limited industrial districts, either as of right or by special permit in accordance with 650-17 of the zoning ordinance, are permitted in the district. The following uses are permitted. Again, the change is special permit in the district. A multifamily dwelling, provided that the total number of dwelling units in the district shall not exceed 286. Mr. DePercio's comment, the proposed density is 286 units on 23 acres, or 13 units per acre. The council will need to decide on this and all pending and future projects whether the applicant has demonstrated that this density is appropriate for the site and the city's needs in terms of housing goals, impact to schools, etc. So again, discussion, any comments by anybody at this point on that one? B of that is the parking lots, car parking lots, garages, accessory to any principal uses at the property, a structure or a group of structures that facilitate the parking of vehicles at ground level, above or below grade, and shall include area for the parking of vehicles at, above, or below grade, under the building, or otherwise integrated into another structure. C, any business use, provided that said facilities are less than 8,000 square feet of floor area, and that such business use is limited to the following. 1, consumer service establishments complementary to the other principal uses at the property. 2, 1 restaurant serving food indoors and or outdoors, or cafe with or without table service, including outside seating and service, or brew pub. And 3, health, sports, and fitness clubs, indoor and outdoor, and related facilities. And then we get to D of section 1, is health, sports, and fitness clubs, indoor and outdoor, and related facilities as accessory to a multifamily dwelling use, and provided that such facilities, if enclosed in a building, are less than 8,000 square feet of floor space. For the avoidance of doubt, any outdoor areas shall not be subject to said floor area restrictions. And Mr. DePercio's question is the same as mine. Are you talking about 2 separate kinds of health, sports, and fitness clubs, possibly one public, one private, or is this a replication of C3?
So they are intended to be distinct from each other. So the idea is that with this overall limit of 8,000 square feet of commercial space, all of that could be used for a fitness club that's open to the public. Separate from that, this project expects, as most projects of its kind have, is to have an accessory fitness club for the residents. And in the drafting of this amendment, we thought it would be appropriate to limit the the size of that accessory space to reinforce the idea that this project is primarily residential.
So the one that's under 3, the Health, Sports, and Fitness Club, that doesn't have a restriction, is the one that would be public?
It is the one that would be public. It does have a restriction, though, if you look at the lead-in to, I flipped the wrong way. If you look at the lead-in to that section, all commercial uses in the aggregate cannot exceed 8,000 square feet. So that public fitness center is included in that aggregate limit of 8,000 square feet.
Okay. It just threw me because you have it in the other piece. So does it really need to be there, or is it because this is one?
Madam Chair, just
Counselor Nabin.
quick clarification, just so I understand this. So is that to say that a public gym would be the commercial use on the property and in lieu of a restaurant? Or it could be either or? Is that what you guys are saying?
Yeah, it could be either or. It could be one or the other. But in total, that commercial space that's open to the public, that's a principal commercial use on its own, is not going to be larger than 8,000 square feet.
All right, so I would suggest that we clarify that 3 is public health, sports, and fitness clubs.
Madam Chair?
Counselor Doucette.
Yeah, thank you. Just want to, is there a 8,000 square feet total, or is it 8,000 square feet per business?
For the business use, it's 8,000 square feet total.
Okay, so that is the maximum you're trying to fill. And it could be one, or could be many.
Right. You could imagine a restaurant and a fitness club next to each other, and maybe
Yeah.
they have some symbiosis, or just one use.
Okay, thank you.
Madam
All right.
Chair,
Yes, Counselor Perlman.
I would love more clarification on why maybe a public gym facility would even be within this language. It just seems like an odd use, given the structure as it currently exists, and given some of the traffic impact and people coming in and out at various times of the day to work out. Even if there was a residential, people could work out at their own gym, or they can go to a restaurant. It does seem like an odd use to put in here, and not something I'm familiar with, at least in others that we have seen, so I would question its purpose here.
Sure, I can. Can you hear me okay? So essentially, we were just trying to leave the retail use open-ended so that, depending on the retail interest that we get, we have options there. We would prefer a restaurant, and we've been working with restaurateurs on preliminary concepts there, but just to keep the options open, if there was, kind of a creative fitness concept, maybe it's something boutique or a little bit unique, just to have the ability to lease it to them. That's kind of the goal here.
Okay, definitely something we should keep in mind, just given at least the restaurant we would get the meals tax from, so, that would be an added benefit, but this to me seems like repetitive of existing uses in the city and not necessarily additive.
If I could, Madam Chair,
Mr. Bizzoni?
that's why when we get this, if we get the special permit, we'll be able to refine all of this. And it'll be a lot easier, because we'll know the space we're actually dealing with.
All right, so again, I would suggest that we clarify that D is a private health, sports, and fitness club. E is accessory solar energy installations, including but not limited to rooftop systems and solar parking canopies and accessory telecommunications facilities and wireless communication facilities.
Madam Chair?
Councilor Doucette.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'd just like to see a small word changing. Accessory solar energy or other renewable energy technologies. So make it more open-ended. There's a lot of options coming up. Geothermal is another option. I don't want that to be excluded because you get zoned out. That's just stupid. So keep the options open.
So where do you want if you could repeat that, please?
Yeah, basically, accessory solar energy and other renewable energy technologies.
Thank you. All right, F is industrial uses permitted by underlying zoning and located within 200 feet of a residential structure. Mr. DePercio's comment is, do you want, this section should be eliminated in our opinion. And it did kind of, I was curious because it is zoned LI, you're doing an overlay, which still means that the LI exists. But I would hope you would never, where would you put an industrial use?
No, it's, the intent of this was in fact to make it more difficult. Once this overlay is adopted, to make it more difficult actually for anybody, whether this project or any project goes forward, to put it at limited industrial use within this overlay.
Because it's by special permit.
Because it would have to be by special permit if within 200 feet of a residential structure.
Right.
And that means that if any residential is built within this overlay,
They'll be,
it would essentially crowd out the ability to do any limited industrial without a special permit.
Does everybody understand that and okay with it?
yeah, Madam Chair, that was a response to, actually, Priscilla when we were talking. She didn't want it to turn into Crowley Drive where you have 5 different types of uses, one on top of the other there. And I said, well, first of all, we're going to do a residential, and as soon as we put up the first building, if we say you can't have a limited industrial use within 200 feet, there can never be a limited industrial there. So it kind of protected the whole parcel.
Madam Chair?
Councilor Perlman?
I guess, then why is it framed as located within 200 feet? Could it just be no industrial within this zone? Is it just so that the surrounding area outside of the overlay would not be able to build?
We added this because Priscilla asked for it. I think our intent is, we're not going to do limited industrial there, and somebody behind us could come in, if we didn't build anything, and do limited industrial, because that's the underlying zoning. So, I mean,
Yeah, and
don't have a
I
problem
think
with
we probably had some concern that to use an overlay to effectively forbid a use that's allowed by underlying zoning might not be appropriate. So we thought the appropriate way to impose that kind of restriction is through setting up a special permit requirement. 200 feet, is what was discussed and asked for. That may not be the right number if it needs to be a different number, but the concept is to do it by requiring a special permit.
So we just, sorry,
Councilor
question. So
Dudley?
we just need to look at that number because the LI zoning will still be in effect regardless if the overlay is there or not.
But this,
But
I
as soon as
believe,
we-
would still impact.
a residential building.
Right.
It precludes it all. If we don't build it, somebody can use the LI anyhow.
Well, yeah, that's what it's zoned for. So
Yeah, yeah.
regardless if you get the permit or not, that's what it's zoned
But
for
what we're
anyway.
trying to do is exclude it properly, in a legal fashion.
Right, but my concern is 200 feet accurate? I guess that's my concern.
Well, it's a significant setback from the existing residential on Blazewood. So it would actually prevent the construction of limited industrial in a portion of the underlying zone where it is currently permitted. And that is before any residential building from our project gets built. But it's a little bit difficult to push that boundary out too far through an overlay, because you could argue it's a little bit too much of a change to what's permitted by underlying zoning. And that's sort of where our concern was, but where we sort of came out on a number that seemed appropriate given the concerns raised by the conservation agent.
So the residential structure would include the house on the last 2 houses on Blazewood, and all of the buildings that you are building as residential.
They would
So
all
within
create
200 feet of
that
all of that.
setback.
All right,
Can I, just one more point of clarification, sorry.
sure.
I guess my concern is that we're here talking about the actual overlay project, and you have the number of units included here, but it's up to that unit of 286 or whatever it is. That doesn't mean that you will be granted the 286. That's the maximum amount. So if we don't like the project moving forward, if we say there's 150 that we want to go here, then that 200 feet, again, is now not, it doesn't apply to that. Because now your project is smaller, and if 200 feet is not going to be the same as what you're proposing now with this plan, would that be a fair question?
Well, it is correct that 200-foot radius, presumably gets larger, right, based on the number of units that would get constructed within this overlay. Absolutely correct.
Okay.
I guess our point is, this is a change we're suggesting and was really suggested to us to reflect the environmental sensitivity of the site.
Sure,
And it's
and
an-
I'm not disagreeing with the actual verbiage, I'm just concerned about, is 200 feet enough based upon that you're proposing right now with the number of units you have. So if we don't allow that many units, then your project's gonna be smaller, which means you're not gonna have as many buildings, and that 200 feet does not.
Right. So
It's gonna be short, you're gonna be
Sure.
short.
So
you know.
if I could kind of go back into the history of this inception, so I think the idea was, what if only a portion of our project ended up being built, right?
Okay.
So worst case scenario, we only build one building.
Right.
So I don't think there's any magic in the 200-foot number. If we assumed that we only build one building and it's to one side of the site or the other, we could measure off of the corner of that building, come up with a number together, and, that would be acceptable to us. We don't intend to build any limited industrial here. So the idea is to actually give, I think, everyone at the city some comfort that if, for some reason, we only build a portion of this
Sure,
site,
and
that there will be no other use that, the owner of the
Right.
parcel could come in and build at a later
right,
date.
and you may not have that plan, but that doesn't mean that you're not gonna turn around and sell the project to someone else. Where I've sat on this council and that has happened, where we're in agreement, but you turn around, the developer, not you, turns around and sells it, and then we got bamboozled.
Sure.
So I'm thinking now, and I'm thinking long-term. So I just want to make sure that we have the correct information before we move forward. Thank you, Madam Chair.
So that's something we can think about.
And I just want a clarification, is something for us to think about as a council as well. Like, what is that magic number? And I know it's all hypothetical, but there's pros and cons to that based upon how many, the actual project moving forward, so.
To talk about this, but in order to build on this site, the infrastructure work that's gonna have to go in here is so expensive.
Sure.
They're not gonna build one building. They can't.
Right.
They're gonna have to build 2, 3, 4, like they plan.
Sure.
And it's because of the way we have to stage the property and the sensitivity of the area around it that it's gonna be so costly. And that's why, to us, those numbers have to be up there for the number of units. But we understand your concern too.
Sure,
Yeah, okay.
All right, number 2, once a development in the district receives site plan approval, an individual as-of-right use may be changed without further site plan approval unless such change otherwise requires site plan approval under Section 272 of the Marlborough City Code, or a modification to a site plan approval under Section L. I'll stop there because this one has a question. Does this one, where are we? 3, Section D.
Section D2A.
All right, this is Section D1F. Right, I lost
the
track of
following
where we
D2A.
are. This section should be eliminated because there's no as of right in the proposed overlay district. And I guess it confused me too. So an individual as of right use may be changed without further site plan approval. What would be an individual as of right use? It would have to be something in the LI district.
Right, so there are, this is technical language, and I find it confusing.
Well, because I was gonna, I got a copy of, I know there are as of right in LI.
So this is in here to be consistent with language that's in other overlay districts, and the purpose of it is, as we did in the lead into this, and as other overlay district zoning amendments do. We don't want to disturb what's allowed as of right by underlying zoning. That's just a typical approach to overlay zoning. Now here, we're making an exception for that, as we just discussed, about limited industrial, and we want to increase the setback from any residential and require a special permit for that. But generally speaking, we didn't want to disturb anyone's ability to still proceed as of right with what underlying zoning permits. So this is language that is in other articles of the code for overlay districts, and it just sort of clarifies that if you're proceeding with an as of right use, unless the change otherwise impacts your site plan, or in the next section, otherwise, I believe, impacts your special permit, you're allowed to proceed without having to amend your site plan.
Okay.
Or in other words, it's a use you'd be able to do without needing a site plan approval in the first place. So the idea is not to make you go and amend your site plan for something that you wouldn't have needed a site plan for initially.
But all buildings have to go to site plan. So even an as of right use would still go to site plan for approval. So,
right. In theory, I think part of this is, some of the existing zoning is residential A2, which I believe is single family. So that may be a reason to retain this exception. But our general purpose was to try to be consistent with other overlay district provisions.
okay, so I guess we'll leave this to the solicitor to look at and decide if it stays in or not.
Madam Chair?
Councilor Doucette?
Thank you very much on this. Yeah, this may be something where basically we expect in Marlborough that you guys follow the code like all other constructions, and you need to follow it the way it is, not the way you expected it to be. So I think that's a great thing for clarification from the solicitor. Thank you.
Okay, the next is Section B. An individual use already granted a special permit may be changed upon the grant of a new or modified special permit as appropriate for that changed use and will be subject to site plan approval, provided, however, that if the change is to an as-of-right use in the district, no further site plan approval is required unless such change otherwise requires site plan approval under Section 270-2 of the Marlborough Code, or modification to a site plan approval under subsection L. So Mr. DePercio's comment is the language beginning with provided, however, that if the change is to an as-of-right use should be eliminated. Again, he's saying there's no as-of-right uses. My concern was that you're mixing special permits with as-of-right in the same paragraph. So if you want to keep that, is there a way to split it? So you talk about the first part, an individual use already granted a special permit, and then a change to an as-of-right use being separate?
Yeah, so we're happy to take another look at that. I think this again was an attempt to be consistent with other language we had seen elsewhere.
Okay.
Where in districts where special permit is required for any project in the overlay. But we'll look at it. Happy to look at it more carefully.
Okay, and I'm sure the solicitor will also. Number E, affordable housing. All site plan review approvals granted to applicants to construct multifamily dwellings shall be subject to the provisions of 650-26 of the zoning ordinance, provided, however, the percentage of dwelling units to be constructed for home ownership or rental purposes to be made available at affordable prices to home buyers or renters shall be 12% with respect to developments of 20 or more units. Councilor Orem is not here, or I'm sure he would be the first one to raise his hand. You fall under the current code. The current code is 15%, or we allow a buyout. I don't know whether this committee would be in favor. I'm not in favor of buyouts. We're trying to remove it, but it's 15%.
I think what we were trying to get across, it would be 12% with no buyout, so we would be consistent with what you're looking at throughout the rest of the community moving forward.
Comments from committee? Councilor Doucette?
This is we're still in zoning at this point, right? This whole thing is still about a zoning change.
This is a zoning
Right,
change,
so
but
I think-
following through with the current zoning rules,
Right,
which
but
is
the-
15%.
Right, which it should still be 15%. I agree completely with that. It should not be anything but that, because it has to adhere to the zoning standards for the city.
Well, the change that we'll be talking about next does move it down to 12, if you remember correctly.
But it would only do it for this zone, for this district. I would rather keep that part at the zoning level. The special permit may be different. But I don't want to change it at this point. It should be, I don't like the precedence of it being tweaked for a zone, I think we should keep it the same, and if we want to change it in the special permit, we can still do that.
So I'm sorry, I'm confused. Are you saying it should be 15?
15, yes.
Okay. All right.
With the ability to be reviewed at special permit, is that what I heard?
Yeah, that's,
It certainly
just
could
strike
be,
any reference
because
to it,
you would,
right?
again, follow the current rules, which does allow a buyout. So if you can convince the council to do a buyout,
Well, we'd prefer to not do a buyout and commit to 12%, because we thought that's what you guys would want to say, to be honest with you. That way you get, you're getting your 12%, and we've actually, when you get further down, you'll see, we restricted the number of 3-bedroom units to 10. So we're trying to keep everything in sequence with what we think is coming, I guess.
Councilor Ossing, did you have a point? Question?
I would just period after 65026, because if it stays at 15%, then it's 15% or a buyout. If we change it at our next topic that we're going to talk about to 12, 65026 is then going to say 12%.
And I respect that opinion, but I disagree with it.
Okay,
So I
that's
don't
fine.
know how everybody else feels. I mean, that's the point of the fact that we were letting people who submitted before had to follow the rules of what's
Madam-
currently there. So now if we're, say, allowing them to have language that lets them then do that.
Madam Chair?
Councilor Doucette?
Thank you. What Councilor Ossing proposed was pretty much solving the issue that I felt needed to be addressed, is that I didn't want to see the exception for affordable pricing to be any different for this, for this district than any place in the city. So referring to a specific location already where the definition is would address my concern as well.
But it would, the current zoning and everybody else in the city has 15, or they've paid money to buy out, starting when if the proposed zoning is approved, anything coming in under that, it would be 12. So those will be, we don't know where, but currently, everybody's 15. So to me, if we allow it to just be whatever 65026 is, as soon as we change that zoning, they now get the benefit of that change, rather than having the benefit after we've approved it and something comes in. Just my opinion. Again, I can be overruled.
I would like to see a vote on that change. I think that's fair at this point, because I propose Councilor Alsing's change to have it referred to in the code, and
All right, it's been moved that E be changed to read affordable housing. All site plan review approvals granted to applicants to construct multifamily dwellings shall be subject to the provisions of a 650 of section 65026, period. Is there a second to the motion? All right, there's a second. Is there discussion?
Madam Chair?
Counselor.
So again, it's trying to stay consistent. If 65026 doesn't change and it stays 15%, then they're putting 15% in with a potential to buy out, is what the current ordinance says. If our next meeting changes it to 12%, as Councilor Doucette said, then it's going to be 12%. And we're staying consistent with what 65026 is. I think putting the numbers in this particular overlay is going to trip us up later on down the road. So I would encourage the Urban Affairs Committee to vote favorably on that amendment.
Is there further discussion?
Madam Chair?
Counselor Doucette?
Thank you very much. So I think in the next meeting, if it's an issue of 15% versus 12%, we should have that conversation at the citywide level, not necessarily related to this proposal. So they're two separate conversations to have, but I want this to be part of that conversation because we're talking about new developments. So examples like this should be part of the mix when we have that conversation and not excluded just because it's at the wrong place at the wrong time. So I'd rather see it as part of the final decision, you know, and we'll have that conversation later on tonight.
All right. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? 2, all those opposed? So it does not carry. We will move on to F, dimensional requirements. The district shall be subject to the dimensional standards in accordance with Article 7 of the zoning ordinance with the following exceptions. Number 1, the district shall consist of 1 or more lots. The minimum acreage requirements for contiguous parcels lots to be developed as a SWR overlay is 20 acres. The question is, we recommend that the minimum acreage requirements be 23 acres, which is the approximate area of the subject parcel. Do you have a response? Acreage confuse me, but I prefer just telling us how many, or us telling you how many units you can build. But
Given that our site is more than 23 acres, I don't think we have concerns, except only to say that, you know, we'll really need to make sure our surveyor is correct about the size of our site if we're talking about a difference of 0.3 acres.
all right, so everybody's okay with the change to from 20 to 23 as suggested by Mr. DePercio?
Sure.
All right. The minimum lot frontage measurement shall be no less than 200 feet for any lot wholly located within the boundaries of the district. And number 3, the minimum side and rear yard measurement shall be no less than 50 feet, and minimum front yard measurement shall be no less than 50 feet for any lot wholly located within boundaries of the district, except for any business use. The minimum front yard measurement shall be no less than 25 feet. We recommend the following be added to the end of this section, and accept that the minimum yard measurement shall be no less than 200 feet from any existing improved single-family lot, and the 200-foot riverfront area as defined by the Wetlands Protection Act and verified by the Marlborough Conservation Commission shall remain undisturbed. Comments from the petitioner, and then
Yeah, so there's really 2 components to this suggestion. Maybe we can address the second one first, which is the prohibition on any disturbance within the 200-foot riverfront area. So I would say that in concept, that is very much consistent with our plans. What concerns us a little bit is that as we proceed through site investigation and we hope through a special permit process, there's no intention to construct or develop within that riverfront area, but you could imagine there could be a need to cause some disturbance with that area in order to facilitate other aspects of, say, a stormwater management system that is going to be designed in the future. So, from the point of view of design at this stage, it does create a restriction, but we understand where it's coming from, the desire of the city. I guess we would suggest that it's something that could certainly be confirmed later on in the process during site plan review or special permit, and that the city doesn't have to put it into the zoning ordinance as a control at this stage. There would be sufficient ability after this stage to restrict any disturbance once we all know a little bit more about the site and in particular the stormwater design.
And I was wondering if it could just be improved by adding in unless allowed by the special permit. If it appears that you have to, and I guess that's one of the hopes that you don't, but then that could be allowed.
Yeah, we think that would address the concern, so thank you.
The committee okay with that? Are you understanding adding that more? Remain undisturbed unless approved by special permit or approved in the special permit. And the first part you're okay with?
No, I'm sorry. So the first suggested change that there be a required minimum setback of 200 feet from any existing improved single-family lot, that's wholly inconsistent with our current site plan, and would require, significant, almost wholesale redesign of the site plan as of today, and would honestly just be a very different project in ways that we can't sort of opine on right now, but it's just not at all consistent with the site plan.
So moving it like you did does not get it 200 feet away from the lot line?
From the residential, the residential lots that are
Existing
developed
improved
on
single-family lot.
Blazewood, I think that's what he's focusing on. There's 200 feet from that property line, which actually the property line's on the other side of some of their buildings, I think even. But if you take it and you run it out, 200 feet's going to impact two of the buildings that are proposed, and we wouldn't be able to build them. I mean, we could probably find a number in between there that we can commit to, but I think the engineers are going to have to look at it a little bit closer.
Counselor Navin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just for clarification, how close is the closest building from that residential lot and your current site plan?
Yeah, we're about 80 feet from that residential lot to the closest building corner. And again, this is uphill through existing forested area that's going to be kept intact or undisturbed, so, as long with native plantings.
Comments from anybody? Do we want to add it? Do we want to change it?
Madam Chair, is there a way to get additional information from the site plan review about why that number was selected? Because there's no context. I don't know if you were at the site plan meeting when this came up, but
This, I don't,
or is it just 200 across the board? It does seem important. I know the renderings obviously have, demonstrate sort of the proximity to those properties, but certainly don't necessarily show what the visibility might be, and 80 feet feels a little bit close without having maybe a reason why they selected this number.
I would assume that they're trying to appease the neighbors' concerns, and so that's a number that they felt comfortable with, but unfortunately, none of them are here to answer. Counselor Doucette?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Just also, I just want to clarify, the 200-foot riverfront area, you're comfortable with those restrictions, right?
Yeah.
You have no issues with that, so.
Right,
modified.
Where
Right,
the concern is
with
just
the mod-
between Blazewood and the buildings that you have.
Right.
That's correct. Just to make the point, with the modification that the chair suggested with respect to that 200-foot setback,
Yeah.
unless permitted by site plan, by special permit.
Okay, thank you.
And Madam Chair, I thought they were going to be here tonight, at least one or two of them from site plan review, because I had hoped that we could walk through some of the verbiage changes they were talking about, and unfortunately they're not. And I would love an opportunity to sit and understand the rationale as well, because it kind of came out of left field.
Madam Chair?
Counselor Doucette?
Thank you very much. So I don't think we're going to finish it tonight. I think we need to walk through it, finish walking through it, and complete it. But there's enough things that have been flagged. I always felt we would be coming back to this in another session. What do you think?
We will see. I was hoping we would get through this. It is 8:45. We're getting closer. There's not,
Right, but I think there's enough caution. We got information we still need to find. I'd rather find that, go through that, find the numbers that work, you know, and come back to this in one more meeting.
All right, I will caution, we have one more meeting. I mean, we have the committee meeting set for the 30th, where this could be added. It would have to be able to be put in proper form and be on the agenda for a meeting on the 5th of December for a vote, or we start all over again.
Okay.
Madam Chair, if I could, I anticipated after I saw the comments today and my dialogue going back and forth with the city solicitor, that if we got through tonight and hit on all the high points and talked about each change like you're talking about, and we talked to site plan review, that then we could focus on getting a final document almost, you know, for you guys to look at the last minute, you know, formatted, everything almost ready. And I'll work with the city solicitor, and Gemma and I are available whenever he is, to try to do this, to get it done. But I think you're right, Councilor Doucette, that if we have a document that this is it, and we hit all your changes, it's easy to make a couple of quick modifications that night on the 30th. And believe me, it's razor tight for us, because the 4th is the drop dead date.
Mr. Solicitor, will you confirm that conversation?
Thank you. You know, I think it depends on the will of the committee. You know, if the committee wants to see an updated document to meet again on the 30th to go over that, I think that's possible. Even if all the policy decisions aren't quite there yet, and if the committee's waiting for additional information. So some of these updates can be made. There will be some wordsmithing to do with portions of it. But that could keep it moving if that's what the committee desires.
All right, so while you're sitting there, just to clarify for me, if we add at the end of the section that sentence, except that the minimum yard measurement shall be no less than 200 feet and the 200-foot riverfront, with that, unless approved in the special permit, does that cover both of those sections or only the last part of that? So that both of them could potentially be taken care of it at the special permit level.
If I may, Madam Chair, I think from our point of view, they're very different standards and very different restrictions. It is our goal and intent not to disturb anything within that 200-foot setback of the riverfront. And to the extent we ever need to do that, it would be a result of further site design, and I think particularly stormwater design. To have a 200-foot building setback from the nearest existing residential single-family house as the baseline, and then have to sort of get a special permit approval to do something different. Again, it's just wholly inconsistent with what we've conceived so far, and I from our point of view, it wouldn't be the right starting point for the zoning. It just wouldn't be consistent with everything we've shown, everything we've designed, and frankly, sort of all the feedback we've incorporated and the changes we've made thus far.
So the site plan the draft site plan, although there's no measurements, it seems like there is a large space between two buildings and one building. They can't be shifted over? Is it?
Some of that in-between area is actually is a resource area, wetlands resource area that we want to stay out of, as a matter of fact.
Okay, so that answers that question. Solicitor?
One thing I was going to offer is, is that in B2, there's already language which is contemplating the city council having the ability to waive or modify dimensional requirements. So that's something that, now that section was drafted as being done during site plan review, as if the city council were the site plan authority. Sounds like from this evening that may not be the desire of the committee, so that will require some updates also. And if the language can be drafted to have that dimensional relief at the special permitting phase, that would be the way, that would make it consistent with that other section if the council wants the ability to do that.
All right, except that says that they are subject to the dimensional standards with the following exception. So the exception is that side and rear yard and the addition of these two pieces.
Right.
And I guess, I mean, This has to be approved by the council, so it's the council's decision what we want the special permit to look like. And then the builder's got to deal with it. I think I've said that before. The builders may not like it, but we have to have something we want. So, Council Perlman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just reiterate the kind of opening objectives of the zoning around environmental stewardship of the land, and so I would feel pretty strongly about this recommendation of the 200-foot riverfront area defined by the Wetlands Protection Act, and I do think that given the sensitivity of the site, that should be prioritized in the language of the document itself.
So you would remove the except part of the 200 feet from existing family and just leave the last part? Or keep them?
Well, I just want to make sure that the second part does remain without the ability to change it in future special permit, because the site is sensitive. That's why we're spending so much time on it, that if it could be waived in a special permit process
Right.
because of stormwater, then the design wasn't appropriate for the site itself.
And the 200 from a single-family lot, we could
I think-
also,
I would want to get more information, like we talked about, with why that number was selected, given the site design, so I want more information from site plan on that.
okay. Anybody else?
Madam Chair?
Counselor Doucette?
The number 200 feet, I think, because of the height difference on the access road to Blazewood, I think that if we actually change that to 100 feet versus 200 feet, because as you said, it impacts two of the buildings, that is a significant impact. And it's not a line of sight. It's very apparent. It can be done in such a way that there's nothing apparent in the line of sight between Blazewood Avenue and this development. The road just goes up the hill and that's it. So, I think we might be able to get away with, if people are willing to the change, I think we should at least put it out there to maybe change it from 200 to 100 feet and see the will of the council, whether or not they agree.
Is there discussion on the changing the 200 in the first part, 100 feet from an existing improved single-family lot? Counselor Navin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was going to make a really obvious statement before Councilor Doucette started his comments and just say there is a big difference between 80 and 200, which is about as obvious as it gets, but there's a big difference. So I would like to see an increase. I don't know that the extra 20 feet for me is enough. I would like to see, a significant portion. These people that are going to be abutting it are going to have, some significant impact. So as we're going through these pieces, I'd be interested in seeing it a little bit more. I recognize that you're going to have to change some of the buildings. I'd at least like to see that explored and to see what you guys can come up with. So I would like to see a little bit more than that, but, I also would like to understand why 200 was thrown out. It's not changing a whole lot in the overall scheme of it, but as we're, certainly getting into the details here, I think it's important to figure it out.
Anybody else with comments? Do we leave 200? Do we change it to 1? Are we adding it in? For now, I'm going to say let's just add it in, and because we're coming back with it anyway, we can always amend it. That would be a simple amendment on the 30th with some input from site plan as to why they put that in there. Okay, let's try to get through the rest of this. Number 4, maximum building height in the district shall not exceed 70 feet, provided that A, for the purposes of measuring height in the district, the front of each building shall be measured on the side facing Sassaville Way, and B, no non-residential structure or building shall be more than 2 stories or 45 feet in height, and C, for the avoidance of doubt, height shall be measured to the average height between plate and ridge of a gable, hip, or gambrel roof. And there was no comment from site plan on that, so I would assume they're okay with it. Everybody okay with the difference in 70 feet and then, I hate double-sided pages. Not to exceed 70 feet And then 2 stories for non-residential structures. Number 5, maximum combined lot coverage, including any permitted accessory structure, shall not exceed 45% of the tract or contiguous parcels. Number 6, the total number of dwelling units within the district shall be limited to 13 units per acre of gross land area. Number 7, the district may contain studio, 1, 2, and 3-bedroom units, provided that the number of 3-bedroom units shall not exceed 10. Number 8, notwithstanding anything contained herein to the contrary, there shall be no yard or setback requirements or planting strips required as to internal lot lines within the district. And this one was confusing to me because I'm not sure what you mean by planting strips. In the parking area or in?
Sometimes, and this, our overlay district may not be an example of this, but sometimes there are districts that contain parcels of land that have been owned separately, have been in separate lots, and may be assessed as separate lots. And so this is a clarifying statement, really just to say, if we have any of those in our overlay, that when we're talking about setbacks, we're not talking about any of those internal lot lines. Our setbacks only apply around the exterior of the overlay. And sometimes in the code, there could be planting strip or other kind of buffering requirements between lots. This is just to make sure that that sort of requirement is also excluded if there are any interior lot lines.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. G, parking and curb cut requirements, except as otherwise provided in this section, parking and circulation requirements shall conform to the provisions of section 650-48 and 49 of the zoning ordinance. Number 1, general. In the district, adequate off-street parking shall be provided. The council and the applicant shall have as a goal for the purpose of defining adequate off-street parking, making the most efficient use of the parking facilities to be provided and minimizing the area of land to be paved for this purpose. In implementing this goal, the council shall consider complementary or shared use of parking areas by activities having different peak demand times, and the applicant shall locate adjacent uses in such a manner as will facilitate the complementary use of such parking areas. Implementation of such complementary use of parking areas may result in permitted reduction in the parking requirements. Parking garages. Parking may be provided at ground level, underground, or in a parking garage. Parking garages can be freestanding or as part of the building dedicated to other permitted uses. 3, parking spaces per dwelling unit. There shall be a minimum parking ratio of 1.5 parking spaces per dwelling unit. Granting of relief from parking and driveway regulations. The City Council may waive any of the foregoing requirements or the requirements of 650-48 and 650-49 during site plan review if it makes a finding that to do so will enhance the overall design of the district. And number 6, or page 6, H, landscaping and screening.
Chair?
Oh, I'm sorry, Councilor Assad.
So, if we're gonna go with the city council not being site plan review, I would just have Jason and the applicant word that appropriately.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Although, would it be part of the special permit language? So that would already be done in that, not at site plan? Solicitor, do you have a?
Madam Chair, that's likely how it would work.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
So we can keep it like it is?
We'll tweak it to have it say during this, instead of during site plan review, during the special permit.
Okay.
Excuse me.
H, landscaping and screening requirements. The district shall be subject to the landscaping and screening standards in accordance with 650-47 with the following exceptions. Number 1, the district there shall be provided with each multifamily building a landscaped area equal to the greatest single floor area of the building, provided that such landscaped area may include undisturbed natural areas such as vegetated areas woodlands, wetlands, and floodplain areas. And 2, the city council may waive any of the requirements of 650-47 during site plan review if it makes a finding that to do so will enhance the overall design of the district. So I guess we have to tweak that to figure out if we're doing it during special permit.
Yes.
Signage, except as otherwise provided in this section, signage will conform to the provisions of Chapter 526 of the City Code, the sign ordinance. Number 2, the City Council may waive any of the requirements of the sign ordinance, again, during site plan review, if it makes a finding that to do so will enhance the overall design of the overlay district. That one is a tricky one because I don't know that we have signage as part of the special permit. That would be site plan review. But I guess you can have that conversation. J, stormwater management system. A development shall have a stormwater management system designed in accordance with the rules and regulations for the subdivision of land in the city, the Department of Environmental Protection stormwater management guidelines, and the city's stormwater ordinance, Chapter 271 of the Marlborough City Code. K, application. An application for a special permit in the district shall comply with the requirements of 650-59 et sec of the zoning ordinance. In the matter of a site plan approval, I guess we need to tweak this. The applicant shall comply with the requirements of the City Code, Chapter 70, Article 2, permits and approvals. The city council in connection, I guess this brings us to we need to decide, is the city council going to be site plan? Or do we want to give this to site plan? I mean, they would do their due diligence and give us recommendations, but why not just let them do it? So we're all okay with having this all worded so that we are only site plan authority, and in this overlay, site plan review committee retains site plan approval.
There still has to be a special permit approved, correct?
Correct.
Okay, but once the special permit is approved, site plan takes over.
Correct.
Okay.
I mean, we would see the plans as part of the special
Right,
permit.
and they have to live within those plans, within 10%, blah, blah, blah.
But
you know.
site plan would get a whole lot more plans. They would get the
Yes.
landscape and all of the,
Right, yeah, no, let site plan do its work.
okay.
Yeah, we would anticipate they would be running simultaneously so that they're giving you the on-the-ground feedback as we're designing.
And usually you go to site plan for the first run-through, and then you go for formal once the special permit's approved.
Yeah.
So we will, so you guys can work on how that language is going to read. City council in connection with a special permit and/or site plan shall review applications with respect to the following design criteria: compliance of sidewalks with ADA, street facade, and exterior walls visible from public ways, public space, scale of building and external lighting, and 3, concurrent with any public hearing meeting associated with a special permit and/or site plan filing, the applicant shall make a presentation to the city council to present the proposed architectural design and consider the comments and inputs from the city council. A finding building elevation shall be submitted prior to the close of the public hearing meeting.
Madam
And
Chair?
Sorry, Councilor
So-
Ossing?
So just learning from our mistakes over at the Assabet River Trail with the building now showing up that the residents didn't expect, we contemplated making sure a balloon test was done, should anything go up, so that the residents can actually see where these heights of these buildings are. I'm not sure if it has to be in here, but that's something we just need to be aware of should this go forward.
Solicitor, is it better to be in the overlay language or as part of the special permit?
It could be required in the language. If it's something we want to look at the special permit phase, we could add some language to put that in essentially as a criteria.
I guess the advantage of it being in the overlay is they would know that they have to do that before they come, rather than start the process and then, oh, by the way, now you have to do a balloon test. So is everybody comfortable adding a sentence worded by the solicitor that a balloon test will,
Madam Chair,
Counselor Doucette?
wouldn't that be part of the special permit?
Well, that's why, to me, if we have it in this, then they know they have to do it even
Okay.
before they start the special permit process,
Okay,
rather than having to think about it later.
right, okay.
And
As a heads up,
maybe
effectively.
in the winter, when the leaves are off the trees, is the better time to do that
True.
than in the summertime when everything's in
Camouflage mode.
full bloom and hides the buildings. Counselor Perlman?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just would clarify as well, I know there were earlier restrictions around the height earlier in the language, but would this final building elevation serve as a maximum? So they could never, it would be a confirmed, they couldn't go any higher than what would be proposed prior to the close of the public hearing?
That would be my understanding.
Just want to make sure that that's reflected in the language.
So we will leave that clarification if you feel it's necessary, and then adding the balloon test. Number L is amendments. After approval, an owner-developer may seek amendments to the approved permits, minor amendments to a special permit, and major or minor amendments to a site plan approval. We'll let you work through that. It shall be a finding of the city council not subject to dispute by the applicant whether a requested amendment is deemed to be a major amendment or a minor one. In general, a minor modification shall not produce more than a material increase in the scale of a project, nor produce more than a material increase in impact on city services, the environment, or the neighborhood. If it's determined that revisions to a special permit are not minor, per 650-59 of the zoning ordinance, an application for a revised special permit shall be filed, and a public hearing shall be held in the same manner as required for a new application, subject to the fee schedule under subsection C3F of 650-59. And number 2, the zoning map described in 658 is amended as shown on the accompanying map, Exhibit A. The newly established Sassaville Way Residential Overlay District shall include all or portions of the properties shown on the map existing at the passage of this ordinance, which properties include the following parcel of land herein identified by the assessor's map and parcels number 29-23.
Madam Chair?
Counselor Perlman.
For L, when it's minor amendments and major minor amendments to a site plan approval, so I don't know if that needs to be teased out
Yes,
separately.
I marked
And
through
then
it.
maybe made by a majority vote of the city council, is that something that also would need to be looked at, given our questions around the vote totals that the solicitor is looking into?
I believe in all our other language with this in it, it is just a simple majority.
Even though it's related to a special permit change?
We've never voted on,
If it comes to a special permit, we're back to 8 votes again, but unless it's satisfies the criteria that
right,
Jason and
if
Right,
it's
so it
deemed
would
as
still
6
be
votes.
subject to that information, okay. Okay, just wanted to reflect that this was another area that would need to reflect those changes once made.
All right, so that gets us reading through everything. Anybody have questions? Counselor Navin?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This one's been sticking with me from the beginning, and I wanted to wait till you got through everything to make everybody circle back. But I want to circle back to the conversation we were having on the uses for the businesses. I appreciate that you guys are going to work to get the best tenant possible. Having a mixed use in here, I think, is important for the city. We often work with people to try and, get the kind of buildings and the kind of tenants that we want. And we have trouble with it, as I'm sure you've seen when we have this conversation on Main Street. I respect the fact that you guys are going to want to have a tenant in there, probably one that pays well. I don't think anybody wants to see an Equinox or something else go in there when it could be, that white tablecloth restaurant that you guys have aptly named on the design. So I think for me, it's a bit of a problem. I think I would suggest seeing it scratched out of this language. I would like to see a restaurant or a cafe or something, as I'm sure you would too, but we don't get a whole lot of opportunities to shape some of this stuff, and so I would like to see that taken out, especially as, having the mixed use gives you a significant advantage of, getting this, changing the thresholds and, to approve this in the first place. I think, we deserve a little bit of, as much certainty as we can, to have a business there that we would all like to see, so.
So you would suggest removing what's on
D.
page 3, number 3 of D1?
Yeah.
I know it's hard to follow through it all. Where we had added the word public health,
Yeah.
sports and fitness clubs. Are you making a motion?
I am.
All right. It's been moved.
Madam Chair, just to clarify, we're talking about page 3, item I, triple I,
Yes,
and striking that.
striking that, yes.
Second.
So there, he's made a motion, are you seconding it?
Yes, I am.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to strike D1, C3. I think following through, public health, sports and fitness clubs, indoor or outdoor, and related facilities. For the avoidance of doubt, any outdoor area shall not be subject to said floor area restrictions. Is there discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of striking? So that is anybody opposed? All right, so we are missing a member of the committee, but that carries. Any other discussion on specificity before Councilor
I
Dumas?
just would some more clarification regarding the 200-foot residential or single-family lot. So if it was down to 100, would you lose still 2 buildings, or would you lose 1 building?
So we do need to look at this more closely, but
Sure.
What I think we could do is combine those 2 buildings to 1 building and push them as close to that wetland buffer as we can.
Okay.
And that, of course, maintains the 200-foot riverfront setback, the 100-foot wetland buffer, and then, I guess what is being suggested maybe is a 100-foot side yard to the residential neighborhood.
And how many units would you lose if it was 200 feet, based upon those 2 buildings?
If it was 200 feet, we'd have to look at that and see exactly how many units that would be. It would be significant.
We just received the feedback.
No, yeah, no, that's fine. I thought in my old pamphlet that we had, you had the broken down of how many units per building, but I could be mistaken with that. I think that was another development. Perfect, okay. Okay, perfect, okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other questions, concerns, motions to change anything that we have discussed?
Madam Chair?
Councilor Doucette?
Thank you very much. I didn't get a chance to say this at the beginning, but I have to at least compliment you folks for taking and reaching back in a positive and constructive way. We have worked with other developers who have had more of an adversarial role when it comes to working with the city, and you guys have shown that there is an alternative to that. And I appreciate you reaching out. Doesn't necessarily mean you will be successful, but I appreciate you guys reaching out and doing the right thing. So, thank you for that. Okay.
Good, Councilor Doucette. That's part of what we wanted to get across to everybody, that they're in it for the whole game. They want to do a project that's good, that the city will be thankful here, and that they'll be proud of. Because they don't want to come in and I don't want to use the wrong terminology, but do a bad job. They want to come in and they want to do the right job in a great project, and they're aware of the sensitivity now in the area, and they've made adjustments for that. So I appreciate your comment.
And I know the planning board made similar comments last night.
Yeah.
Councilor Croman?
I was just going to ask if we're going to go through any of the planning board specifics. And I know it wasn't necessarily,
I'm sorry, I should have read the planning board's recommendation.
yeah, just because it wasn't connected to specific items around the language, but I do think it's important and to note that it was a neutral recommendation, so I think it might, and I know you and I were both at that meeting, so I would love to see this kind of read into the record and kind of discussed a little bit more broadly.
Thank you. It was in my pile of stuff to read. So, Council President Michael Ossing regarding the Council Order 23-100-8941. At its regularly scheduled meeting on 11/13/23, the board took the following action regarding the above-referenced council order. On a motion by Mr. Russ, seconded by Dr. Finby, the board voted to send a neutral recommendation to the City Council on the above-referenced proposed zoning amendment. The motion carried 7-0. The board provided the following reasons in reaching its recommendation. The developer established that the proposed zoning amendment is more consistent with the character of surrounding neighborhood than the existing limited industrial zoning. In the planning board's opinion, the developer established the proposed zoning amendment would impact the Blazewood Avenue neighborhood and the Assabet River Rail Trail users less than a commercial development, but argued the proposed development could negatively impact its abutters, the height of the buildings in close proximity to a single-family neighborhood, and potential impacts to Fort Meadow Reservoir. The developer did not establish the proposed zoning amendment would provide the city with the type of housing that's not already available in the city. However, it would benefit the city by preventing a commercial development, which could severely impact a sensitive environmental area. The proposed zoning amendment would give the city an additional opportunity to reduce the overall impact through the special permit process. If the City Council sees fit to approve the zoning amendment, the Planning Board suggests the following items be considered: implement additional safety protocols for the Assabet River Rail Trail crossing, review the Blazewood Avenue neighborhood impact, review the Fort Meadow Reservoir impact, conduct building height studies in relation to adjacent neighborhoods, explore options to reduce impervious surface, increase the number of affordable housing units, or consider reducing the cost of the affordable housing units, consider making the runoff temperature and sediment monitoring data public record, further defining the language within the proposed zoning amendment and addressing the board's comments. Sincerely, Sean Fay, Chairperson. So I think the things that they are suggesting would probably come under the special permit part of this, where we could make sure that those things were addressed, unless people feel that there's something else that needs to be added to the language to address. No? All right, so it sounds, well, I guess I won't assume. Are we leaving this on the table till the November 30th meeting?
So moved?
Councilor Perlman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just had a question in terms of the timeline of when we would receive some of the information from the solicitor and from site plan review about some of the additional comments, and when we would receive this. I know if there's a meeting on the 30th, we did reflect about how some of these things do come in the day of, and that can make it difficult to digest the information and be able to be barely prepared for that meeting. So I just wanted to make sure that that's on everyone's radar, of what the, I guess, the latest timeline that we would expect that information from, and if anyone from site plan could be present at the meeting if questions arise.
I would think that the site plan would be willing to come if they were asked. At least some of them would be. I know Mr. DiPersio comes to meetings when he's requested, if he can. I have no comment other than the fact that next week is Thanksgiving. It's a short week for the city. The meeting of the 27th, the agenda has to be ready by Tuesday at noon. This isn't really for that, but if the solicitor and Attorney Pizzoni think they can work this through with the hopes that we could get it by the 28th, 29th, at least to have it the day before the meeting, would be helpful, so we have a chance to read through it. I mean, it will be the language that I just read and we talked about with their legal changes.
Yeah, and possibly any feedback we get from a site plan review as well, that Jason and I can talk through with them. Yeah, I'm committed to do it, and I don't want to interfere with your holiday, Jason.
Yes, I don't want anyone to ruin their holidays, just it would be helpful to have the information ahead of time, since we know some folks received it, at the end, and it would be important for us to all come prepared at that meeting.
All right. Counselor Navin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with your concern about the timing, and, I think we've got quite a bit of information here, but I don't want the committee to, the committee wants to spend some time hearing more about this and getting the answers. I certainly think that's fine. So I'm going to limit some of my comments if we're going to meet again on this, but I want to echo what Councilor Doucette said. You folks have been willing to work with folks in the city. I know you've made efforts to reach out to the neighborhood. I think that is, you should be applauded for that. And we have seen a significant shift. I would just ask folks to, consider, and this is not a reflection on the developer or any of the representatives here. One of the reasons I think that we happen to see you guys acting in a very responsive and responsible way is that we are currently at a point to discuss zoning. Oftentimes when developers come to the city, they already have either by right or by special permit abilities to build a project. And they are able to perhaps take a more adversarial role and kind of push things that, we may not be wanting to see. And we've seen that time and again in this council. So I would just ask that as people kind of consider this and they look at the zoning language, this really is the time in which we are making a decision to hand, you as the developer, quite a bit of permissions to go forward and build this stuff. The special permit is important. I'm glad that the changes were made so that any multifamily residential development would require a special permit. But as we have seen time and again on this council, our ability to shape a project is often hampered by land court and by how well-funded a developer is and how they can continue to pursue the project that they want. You have made a lot of changes. This zoning language speaks, and you have done, and I don't want to take away from how challenging this is for the developer, because you are being asked for a ton of information about a project that you are still trying to conceive, and you're not going to want to spend the money to go ahead and get all of that information when you don't know if you're going to have permission to do so. So I want to recognize how challenging that is for you. At the same time, I think the issues that we're looking at convey just how difficult this is and just how challenging this environmental area is and just how sensitive this area is. So as we start to think about whether or not this zoning amendment should go forward, I would just ask people to think about the fact that this is the time in which we are able to shape this project and what goes on this site. And I'll leave it there for now. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, so if there's no further comments, we will leave this in committee until November 30th. And
7:30.
hopefully at that meeting, it will be short. Well, the meeting won't necessarily be short, but the discussion
Excuse me.
will be shorter than tonight. So again, thank you. I think we all agree that we appreciate the work that you've done and the changes that you've made. And
Thank you very much.
thank you.
Yeah. And I'll come without crutches next time.
Good. All right, we're going to just take a quick couple-minute break while they leave before we get on to our second agenda item.
It's nice seeing you, brother.
conversations outside, please, we got another meeting to do. Thank you.
(721H), proposed amendment to Chapter 650 zoning relative to definitions of affordable housing, Marlborough Village District zoning. This was referred to Urban Affairs and the Planning Board. We have the Planning Board's recommendation, which I'm going to read right now, so I don't forget to do it. Council Vice President Kathleen Roby, Council Order Number 22-23-108-721H, proposed zoning amendment. At its regularly scheduled meeting on October 23rd, 2023, the Planning Board took the following action. On a motion by Dr. Fenby, seconded by Mr. Russ, the board voted to send a favorable recommendation to the City Council on the above referenced proposed zoning amendment with the following recommendations. Consider whether the affordable housing requirements in the proposed amendment will make redevelopment projects along Main Street cost prohibitive. Consider excluding Main Street from Maple Street to Mechanic Street from the requirement. Increase the parking space fee to $40,000. Keep a tabulation of the number of parking spaces waived in exchange for fee payments. Designate an account for the funds received from the parking space fees to be used to create additional parking in the downtown area. Yay, Fenby, Fay, Fenby, Fortin, LaVenture, and Russ. The motion carried 5-0. Sincerely, Sean and Fay, chairperson. So because we created this document, I'm not going to go through the language. Everybody should be familiar with it. The City Council may have the Council Urban Affairs Committee minutes. If you got their, I guess their July 24th meeting packet, they're in there. So we had our public hearing, they had theirs. I do have it? A proposed, well, maybe, do we want, anybody have comments on the Planning Board's recommendations? Councilor Navin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the review from the Planning Board and sending down some of these suggestions. There are some interesting pieces to it. Look, we want to make sure, that we get this right. I think that a lot of the conversations that we had around the zone, at least the zoning piece, not the affordable piece, but on the zoning piece on the village district, we were responding directly to projects that have been proposed on Main Street. For me personally, one of the reasons that I wanted to see the building heights changed, and the parking issues addressed was for development on Main Street so that we could try to still incentivize future developments, but also not make them, so they are so impactful. So I think the one piece that I would, thank the Planning Board for, but perhaps not be looking to include in any sort of amendment is excluding Main Street from Maple Street to Mechanic Street from the requirement. And then if we are talking about these developments becoming cost prohibitive, look, I love the increase in the parking fee, but I don't know if that goes a little bit further than it can to make a building viable. That said, we are only allowing future developments to buy out up to 20%, and that has to be allowed by special permit. So perhaps increasing that parking fee is not as make or break as it may seem. And then finally, I think that, keeping it, we talked a lot about available parking spaces, and I think it would be helpful to understand which parking spaces are waived. And then also we should be, as we talked about, keeping a tabulation of how many parking spaces, are accounted for downtown so that we are able to look at future developments and make sure that they're responsible. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And I know for myself, the last part is the one that I think we have dealt with all along. We don't own the parking garages, so we can't really control the fact that the funding would be used to repair them. There is language that it's supposed to be used to provide more parking spaces, but I think that that's the idea behind it, is to create additional parking in the downtown somehow. Anybody else with comments? Councilor Doucette?
Thank you much, Madam Chair. I agree that with Councilor Navin as far as excluding Main Street. First is, Maple to Mechanic is basically all of Main Street. So it's somewhat counterproductive to what the entire intent of this was to be. So I think that that's not, agree to disagree on that one. Increasing the parking space fee, I think, has merit, but I think it, the problem with the flat fee is it always gets eaten through inflation over time, so that's another part of this.
All right, I did have a proposal to add one piece. I suppose I should have copied this. I apologize, I meant to. In the Wayside Zoning District, there's language that says facade step back. A step back in the facade of a building shall occur at the upper floors for all buildings above 3 stories in height. For example, the 4th story of a 4-story building shall be recessed from the lower 3 stories of the primary facade with a step back. Or the 4th and 5th story of a 5-story building shall be recessed from the lower 3 stories of the primary facade with a step back. 5 feet shall be the minimum step back. I guess what I was going to look at and forgot to do we have a 5th story? We're only doing 4 stories. So
For Wayside.
we would need to, I guess, just get rid of that sentence and just go with the example of a 4-story building. I did ask the solicitor. He does not feel that adding this would require a new public hearing. Word that correctly. Councilor Navin?
Sorry, Madam Chair. And I really don't want to get back into this conversation, but when talking about a roof deck, I know we had the conversation of it could be the 4 stories and there could still be a roof deck, so I don't know if that would apply to that piece of it, and I will just leave that there and hope it does not open a can of worms that I did not want to.
The 4th story of a 4-story building shall be recessed from the lower 3 stories of the primary facade with a step back. So floor 3 is here. You'd have the step back, and floor 4, the roof deck, I think, is on the next floor. And looking at this, I would suggest that 650-34 of the Marlborough Village District D Design Standards 2A building scale, we would add a new number 4 to read this language. I've tried to figure out where it would go. So I didn't mark a page, but if you go to the section that's 650-34, which I think is on page 6. Actually, page 5 starts it. It's on page 5, almost at the very bottom. Number Roman numeral 7, by amending chapter 650 zoning, section 650-34D2D to read as follows. New text underlined, delete as shown with all of that. There would be a D, external materials. This would be added into design standards, which is D2. So I think it would be added between Roman numeral 6.2 and Roman numeral 7. But I'm sure the solicitor can figure out where it fits in if, in fact, it's agreed that we want to add this language. It just stops some of the issues that we have with taller buildings being just straight lines. So I can't make a motion. If somebody
So moved.
agrees with this, if they would like to move that we add this in.
So moved.
All right, Counselor Navin has moved that we add this language. Do you want me
I'll
to read
second.
it again, or are we clear? Counselor Doucette, was that a second?
Yes.
Thank you. Is there discussion? I hear chattering down there. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4. Any opposed? All right, so we will have the solicitor add that language. Are there any other questions, comments? Counselor Pearlman?
Thank you, and I guess it's also on page 6 at the bottom. Just wanting clarification, I know it says spaces in public garages and lots within 1,000 feet of the development can be counted to fulfill the required spaces with payment in lieu required. Was this something that we had wanted to keep? I know, in some of the other projects, that's been an issue of just using public garages. So I didn't know if this was language that we were trying to eliminate, or we just wanted to keep in.
This was language we came up with after 3 meetings of
I didn't know if this.
long discussion to allow, but it was made clear that it was the
The public, is that,
public.
okay.
Yes.
To me, that seems very similar to city-owned, so I just wanted to make sure it was clear.
EDA.
It was not private
Okay.
parking, it was
Okay.
public parking. And
So-
it was overnight parking, not,
Right,
Other-
so, Madam Chair,
Counselor Doucette?
thank you. One of the things, just go past what Councilor Perman talked about. The issue came with the Bolton Street parking area was, it was how that parking was already assigned. And it was a contradiction, because they're saying, oh, we can count what's within 1,000 feet, but there's a tighter criteria than that. Because what they really should do is respect basically how the parking is assigned. So they shouldn't be counting the overnight parking, and it should be clearer that it has to be within the parking regulations of those spaces. They can't, so I'd like to see a little bit wordsmithing there to explain that, okay, you can count these, the parking spaces you count have to live within the constraints of the parking regulations associated with those spaces. I'm not sure how to word that legalese, but I hope I'm getting my point across. Does that make sense?
Marlborough Village District, any new commercial or mixed-use structure that's required to provide parking spaces may request to make payment to the city in lieu of providing for part of the on-site required parking. That is maximum number of parking spaces which may be subject. So it doesn't really talk about where on that section.
No, I think you're at the page before.
It talks about it in another section where we,
Page 6 at the very bottom, item 2, right? Spaces in public garages and lots within 1,000 feet of development can be counted to fill required spaces with payment in lieu required. What I'm saying is, when you can't count, you have to, the counting of the spaces has to reflect the regulations associated with those parkings. So it's, if we want to say something as blatant as non-overnight parking, or.
well, we do have on page 6, Roman numeral 7, we're amending chapter 650 to read, spaces in public garages and lots within 1,000 feet of the development can be counted to fulfill the required spaces. So that's pretty specific.
Right, but I'm thinking that needs to be corrected. Okay?
Needs to be what?
Correct. Somehow, we might have to worry about the wording of that, because basically, the count shouldn't include parking spaces that do not allow overnight parking. I'm not sure how to word that in, or if that needs to be clarified.
Madam Chair,
Counselor Ossing.
I guess to put Councilor Doucette's concern another way, if there's restrictions on public parking spaces, he doesn't want those counted in this one. Is that
Yes.
the right way?
Yeah,
In
yeah.
other words,
It feels.
if I
open.
can't count Bolton Street because I can't park overnight, I shouldn't be using Bolton Street lots as
as his town.
available parking spaces.
Right, we wouldn't allow that to count, so we would know exactly where.
But it doesn't say that.
It's
Because
unclear.
that's a
It's
public
not
parking.
clear.
Right,
It's not
so-
clear, is the point. I'm wondering if it's clear, you know, is that something to be wordsmithed in such a way and still within the constraints?
Madam Chair.
Mr. Solicitor?
So because it's gonna be a special permit, we could, where in the next, I don't know what page we're on, but where it says, you know, may be authorized by special permit in parking spaces designated for overnight parking, we might add subject to any applicable parking regulations, something like that.
All right, so would it be part of the eliminate parking minimums for the existing off-street parking? No, that's, unless it's part. So you could add it, you could figure out where to add it in 7?
Yes.
In that spaces in public garages that are permitted for overnight parking? I thought we added this language that had that part, but I guess
No.
we
the
didn't.
problem is that we
So
got
there
hit by it
is-
with Bolton
There
Street,
is
but
a
never got back to this.
9(2)A with the payment. So I just think the language doesn't match, so payment made to the city of Marlborough in lieu of providing, and then it goes, may only be authorized by special permit in parking spaces designated for overnight parking and subject to conditions set forth. But then it
Thank you.
doesn't match in the other, I think it's a little,
Well, it's all part of,
yeah, it just seemed like it was hanging, like, is that even necessary in that other section?
well, I think we wanted to clarify that we can do it, because there's so many different sections. That's sections 34E, the other ones,
it just seems odd, because it's just like a random 2, so I didn't know if it was in the wrong spot.
Okay, I see what
well,
you're saying.
this is what I remembered, we added in there very clearly specifying that it was in parking spaces designated for overnight parking and subject to conditions set forth by special permit. So there is language that
That's-
says.
Yes, on page
Yeah.
7, the following
Yeah,
page.
in the
Right.
following page.
So I didn't know
there
if
is
this was a
yeah.
carryover by mistake, or it was maybe needing that additional clarification.
No, I think it was clarifying what existed currently. Payments
Okay.
made to the city, because then it could just be anywhere, really.
In
may
question, do
only
we want to
be
be, then
allowed-
it's a question of being redundant.
So are you comfortable with this clarifying language in,
I think as long as it's already identified, I'm fine with it then, you know.
I'm sorry, you're okay?
Yeah, I'm fine. It's been identified, yeah, that's
All
fine.
right. Any other concerns, issues?
Madam Chair,
Counselor Ossing?
so the planning board's letter, so I'm a little, I understand this, they say, consider whether affordable housing requirements in the proposed amendment will make redevelopment projects along Main Street cost prohibitive. And then is the next one saying exclude Main Street from the requirement of affordable housing?
Yeah, it was a little confusing to me, and because I would argue that we are not trying to make anything cost prohibitive, and that our approval of 2 special permits for buildings wasn't our fault that they're, well, one of them, and the other one, neither one of them, really. We approved them. Whether they're cost prohibitive isn't really up to us. With the economy the way it is and the price of stuff, nobody should be building, but they are. So, I mean, who we had prior to this, they seemed gung-ho, ready to go. They talked at the planning board about they're self-financed, they don't need to borrow from anybody, they can begin tomorrow. So, they do sort of don't go well together. If we exclude Main Street, then it wouldn't be unless they're saying exclude Main Street.
I guess I'm reading it as they're saying the affordable housing component shouldn't be tied to development in the Marlborough Downtown Village District, like it currently reads in our current zoning.
Oh, okay.
I mean, that's how I'm reading it. I mean, if I'm reading it wrong,
And, I mean, that is a change that's being made. Currently, Marlborough Village District is excluded.
correct.
I would prefer it to be included, but I may be one. We all seem to agree we wanted it added. Make them, why not? It should be everywhere.
Oh,
So, Councilor Irish,
thank you,
sorry.
Madam Chair. So currently, right now, the affordable component is not included in the, into the
Marlborough
MV zone
Village.
district?
Right.
It is not? Okay. Because that was a concern I had, because if a builder comes in, they're trying to fill those apartments, and we'd be trying to, they may not be able to fill anything there, but if they're held to not having to have the affordable units, then that should be fine, I guess, but. So I was a little
Madam
confused by having that component in there, okay.
And I think the affordable pieces we're learning is an issue for every developer. It's the fact that it's 80% of AMI, and for Marlborough, that's a high number.
Correct.
So the rent, even with the affordable, is still out of the reach of a lot of people. Councilor Perlman, did I hear?
Yes, I was just going to reiterate that I think it's important to keep the affordable housing component in this district. We know that we're not going to be able to be building affordable housing on our own, and being able to have it in future developments in this area, I think, is important for the mixed income. And as you mentioned, the 80% really is still not even, affordable. So it's not like it's as people paying, almost nothing to live there. You're still paying a large portion of rent money to be in these apartments. So I was supporting what you were saying earlier.
Thank you. Any other comments? Anybody ready to make a motion?
Motion to approve?
Councilor Doucette has moved to approve the language of the order as amended with the addition of tonight's.
As amended, yes.
I will second. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, and there are no opposed. We only have 4 members. All right, this then will be reported out, I've lost track of where we are, on the 27th. Does it need to go back to you, Mr. Solicitor, to be put in final form? Or can you have this on our agenda with the addition of the language that we could then just vote on it? Or, I guess it wouldn't be at that meeting, it would lay on the table?
You can report it out on the 27th of November to have the solicitor put it in final proper format for December 4th and vote on December 4th, and you would make the 12/18 deadline that we have for the 90 days.
All right, does that work for everybody? I'll report out that it's a favorable recommendation. We did make one amendment, and the vote will be on December 4th.
Motion to adjourn then?
It's been moved and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4. We are adjourned. I hate it when I don't have the clock.